Welcome to Windows on the World. With an election looming, Piers Corbyn has been asked by the mainstream media to give his opinions. He's often misrepresented by the mainstream media. Indeed, today, Windows on the World got an inquiry from the Mail Online, which has in the past tried everything they can to undermine Piers. Certain journalists there have. So we've got Piers in the studio and he's going to give his opinion and what his analysis is of what's going on and what this election could reveal and what it holds for the British people. So Piers, you were recently interviewed by the Daily Telegraph about the election, the forthcoming election. What did you say and what did they say that you said?
What they reported and what I said was accurate. I said many other things, and I also was careful to not say certain things because they always try and misrepresent about all sorts of issues, but I just refused straight away to answer them and said, look, you go to my brother's press office for that sort of stuff. Anyway, but the main point I made when they did publish it, which, to be fair, I didn't quite expect. I said, look, the BBC is very dishonest. And that is the main, mainstream media in the country, and they are totally against my brother, and they're out to make up a false narrative and also promote cover-ups of all sorts of things. And I said specifically the Orgreave issue of the miners, Hillsborough, the stadium, the Jimmy Savile case, and of course climate change. There they have a narrative which is totally dishonest and involves cover-ups, and they printed all that stuff. And I said the same mainstream media are totally against Jeremy because he is against the citadels of globalised corporate power, and they actually manipulate and control the BBC. They do not want my brother Jeremy as Prime Minister because he'll hold back the sort of things they want. And I think this election, it's not what we're being told it's about, right? Theresa May says it's to get a bigger mandate on Brexit or something. Now look, that is ridiculous. She's already got a mandate on Brexit. And she's only got the mandate on Brexit because my brother and the Labour Party said they would abide by the wishes of the British people and trigger Article 50. So she's got Article 50. She's going to lead the delegation and negotiate, right? Now, I think what she's after is to try and get, but it's a gamble, to try and get a bigger majority so that she can actually betray Brexit. Because as it is, there's enough hard Brexiters in the Tory party in Parliament to stop her betraying. And if she gets a bigger majority, she'll be able to have more wriggle room. And this has been implied in the media already, And then, of course, she's denied it. And if Jeremy was leader, there wouldn't be any double crossing and deceit with people. People would know what was going on. And I think the point about these negotiations you have to understand is that the negotiations don't happen one way or the other because of the nice voices of people sitting around a table. They happen because of what's happening outside and what the strength of the British economy is in negotiations. And it's very obvious basic things are there irrespective of who's the Prime Minister. I mean, one is if they want to fight about the fishing industry with the European Union, Britain can just take over the fishing waters as they were before. In terms of trade, of course, the European Union needs Britain more than Britain needs the European Union. I mean, there are other issues, of course, that have to be sorted out, such as, manufacturing parts for cars in Europe, and then they're bought into Britain for putting the cars together. So there are difficulties there, but you see, the answer to that is going to be something like, well, if the European Union is awkward, then we make these parts ourselves. And then Jeremy and John McDonnell's idea of a national investment bank comes in because they say, OK, we've got to have investment to make these parts for these cars. Let's do it. Whereas the Tories, of course, are going to fall down, bowing to corporate power, which is what this is all about. But the fact is they can't pin anything on Jeremy about Brexit, because without him as leader of the party, we wouldn't even be here talking about this. We'd have a Blairite Labour leader who would be dithering, procrastinating, not wanting to trigger yet, stuff like that. That's what we'd have, and we'd have the people versus Parliament. And with Jeremy, we're having accountability, which is what it's all about. And I would say that, when it comes to the future, Jeremy stands for a better future. And the Tories go on about old business and so on, but look, the fact is that most business in Britain is run by SMEs, small and middle enterprises. And Jeremy and the John McDonnell are crystal clear that they're going to do a lot more to get SMEs more effective. And actually not have certain restrictions imposed on them, which is normally Tories going on about restrictions imposed on SMEs or unnecessary burdens. But, Jeremy says, no, we're going to deal with that. And, of course, ensure workers' rights in all these places.
Piers, what would you say to people who are now feeling as though your brother's defeated because he's been portrayed as though he's being defeated? What would you say to them?
Yeah, look, they would say that, wouldn't they? Jeremy was 200 to 1 against when he started out to be the leader of the party, and he won. Okay, well, this says it all. The opinion polls said that Trump wasn't going to win. The opinion polls said that Brexit wouldn't happen. Now, I and others said they were wrong on both counts, and they were wrong on both counts. Now, this stuff is basically made up. They have these great figures about, Jeremy's N% behind or something. Well, okay, but you can ask loaded questions and get biased answers, and that is what they do. And of course, they choose who they're going to ask. And I think in the case of Brexit and so forth, they didn't have enough sampling of C and D group social groups, right? Well, the same is happening on this, I've no doubt. And look, those are the people, as you're out there, if you don't normally vote and are pissed off with politics, you have to make sure you get out and vote for Jeremy Corbyn, because this is the only chance in a lifetime to get a government which is going to fight for you, to fight for fair treatment for the underprivileged and the poor, but also fight for better opportunities for business to grow in Britain instead of being run by the corporates around the world, which are depressing living standards in the West and exporting jobs into slave labour in India and the Third World. We have to combat all of this and have living standards raised everywhere. So it's your duty to get out and vote. First of all, register to vote if you're not. Secondly, if you know anybody who's not registered to vote, get them to vote. And thirdly, go and vote on June the 8th for a new future.
Thank you very much, Piers. Welcome to Windows on the World. I'm Mark Windows. Now, over the years, we've put out a lot of information. The Windows on the World show has run for several years now. We've exposed corruption, found solutions, and put out some very useful information on many subjects since we started doing this. This includes, of course, the bigger picture, along with well-researched history, science, and, of course, health matters, which we also cover. Now, our initial website was landofthefree.co.uk, and this was set up to fight the corporate courts, rogue bailiffs, and the unlawful actions of public officials. I and many others have successfully fought criminal bailiff companies and won in court against dishonest councils. This information is all still available. The journalistic integrity of Windows on the World is very important, and we tried to put out information that's forensically accurate and simplistic as possible. So we try and put everything out in a very easy way for people to understand, because over the years there's been a lot of misinformation and disinformation, especially with where people stand within the law, and it's got a lot of people into trouble. So we've always stayed on the right side of the law, but being able to empower people to go into court and do the right thing. That's very important to us. Now, I put this information out to the public because I feel it needs to be there. And even within so-called alternative media, there is much
information which is misleading and incorrect. In fact, all the things the now ridiculous mainstream media accuses the alternative media of, there are people putting out stuff that's very, very unhelpful, and we try not to do that. So we accept no funding from anybody and are completely independent. And it's now increasingly necessary that we get some help to fund what we're doing. We're looking for sponsors from self-employed small business sector, which, as we know, is being destroyed, and we cover this a lot on the show with the plans for regeneration, the soaring business rates, and the destruction of what we used to know as our environment, because we're finding that people now are being pushed out and socially engineered from the places that they need to be. We'd also like to appeal to individuals who might be able to donate. Now, the donate button on the site, you can just scroll down to the bottom of the page, and it's also on every article and every video on the site, on windowsontheworld.net. Now, I've never asked for any donations before, but things are getting a bit tighter for us, and we want to carry on and expand what we're doing. That's the most important thing, to expand what we're doing and be able to bring you much more information, which is very difficult at the moment because there's just a few of us. So, the bottom line is, if you can spare a few quid and enjoy what we're doing, press the donate button, we'll be very grateful. And if there's anybody out there, small businesses, who benefit from the sort of information that we put out, and we know there's quite a few because we've been contacted by them, if you'd like to make a small contribution or help out in any way, we'd be most grateful. That's the end of that, and we'll see you soon on Windows on the World.